Hey Flosstube! My name is Lynn and this is my channel Those Missing Stitches where I talk all about cross stitch and a little bit about books at the very end. Today is Sunday, March 2nd, 2025 and this is my Flosstube number 27. Welcome and thank you for joining me on this fabulous cross stitch and reading journey that we're all on. Today, I want to talk about some Flosstube shoutouts. I have the whips to show you of everything that I worked on in February, and then at the very end, I will also talk about and give a little bit of a review of all the books that I read in February as well. So I hope you stick around and enjoy the video. So first I'll start with my Flosstube shoutouts. First I want to shout out to the Story Stitcher. This is a channel that I discovered recently and I will link her down below if you're interested in checking her out as well. She has several projects that are similar to my taste and especially interested in what she showed on her last video. She talked about how 2025 would be the 250th birthday of Jane Austen, or 250th anniversary of her birthday, I guess. So in 2025, there is a hashtag going around Stitch Jane 2025, and the idea is to stitch on anything Jane Austen inspired. It can be any pattern by any designer, and to post your progress under that hashtag Stitch Jane 2025. So I do have a couple of things that I worked on in February that I'll show you when I go through my whips. I'm super excited. Jane Austen is one of my favorite authors, and I have a couple of pieces that I'm working on that actually are Jane Austen inspired. So getting those back out and getting some momentum on those again for that hashtag. So check out the Story Stitcher. She will be linked down below. The second Flosstuber that I wanted to shout out is Adelaide Stitches. She is absolutely adorable. I love her accent. I think she's Australian, but I love watching her videos. She's just so upbeat and just wonderful accent and so sweet. She has very similar taste to a lot of the things that I work on. She has some witchy stitcher and some tiny modernness. And she was also working on 324 by Works by ABC, which is a piece that I was working on as well. So if you like some of the stuff that I work on, she's very similar. I will link her down below as well, and she's a good channel to go check out as well. Okay, so for my whips, I always like to start with stats, so I'll give you my stats for February. I worked on 11 projects. I had a total of 25,254 stitches. I had one finish and one new start. So let's get to it. I'm going to go through all my whips and I will start with my finish. I did not think I was going to get to this. I actually filmed my video last month and said I'm participating in the 324 Sal, which if you did the goal of the 324 Sal of doing one square a day, you would have been done by February 11th. And I think I filmed on the 8th or 9th of my last video and said, there's no way I'm going to make that. And then I just put my head down and worked on it the next 2 or 3 days and got it done. So this is 324 by Works by ABC. I stitched it on a 25 count silvery moon Lugana with all the called for DMC, 1/1 full cross. And here is my finish. I love it. It's so colorful and pretty. It did turn out great. There's a lot of work to pull all the colors, but it was so worth it. It's just so gorgeous. Here is the finish, and it's so tiny and intricate on this 25 count. I just love it. So there it is. Okay, my one finish. Okay, next is my new start. This is a chart called Sweetheart Chart. It is by Hello from Liz Matthews. It was a Patreon exclusive that is available on her Patreon through March 5th, March 14th, and then she switches to a new one. So if you do want to grab it, you can go subscribe to her Patreon. Otherwise, I know they'll be released to the public, but I just don't know her timeline of when she releases it on her regular website. So this one is called Sweetheart Chart. It's by Hello from Liz Matthews. I designed a new color that I had in mind that I wanted to start this on, so it will be released in my shop in April. I'm going to call it, I think, Delightful Dora. And this is a 20 count Ada that I started it on, and I'm using um, Color and Cotton Dragon Fruit, and I'm doing 2/1 full cross. I did a total of 4,314 stitches in February, so I'm at 53.84%. This is going pretty fast, and I'm really loving it. So here is where I'm at. Pink on pink. I love how this is coming out. And the Three Little Birds by Bob Marley, the song has a very special meaning in my heart. So the fact that there's three birds in this and in a heart has some extra special meaning to me. So I'm loving stitching this one and it's going pretty quick. So I think I can finish it pretty quickly too. So I'm excited to get that one done and see progress on that one. Next, I'm going to talk about the stuff that's just in my regular rotation that you've seen before on my channel. The next piece is Fruits of Plenty. This is by Modern Folk Embroidery. I believe it was our 2021 stitch along, but I didn't start it till later, till like 2023. I am stitching this also on 25 count silvery moon Lugana 1/1 full cross with DMC, I believe 3750 and 932. In February, I did an additional 3,179 stitches. Here's where I was the last time I showed it. I think it's been quite a while since I pulled this one out, but I found some new gusto for this one. I'm really excited to see some progress on this. Now, in total, I'm at 23,577 stitches for 49.74%, so super close to halfway done. And here's where I'm at now. Love it. Love me some modern folk embroidery. I think part of why I'm interested in working on it more is he released a new pattern. I think it's called like Heart House or House of Hearts or something. Just released a week or so ago, and I really want to do it, but I really don't want to start another modern folk embroidery until I'm at least a little further along on this one. I don't think I'm going to make a goal of actually finishing it before I start that other one, but at least a little further along. So this one's coming back out. Fruits of plenty. Okay, next, I pulled out Morning Blooms. I pulled out a couple of my pieces that are like the closest to being finished because I'm really excited about the finishes I've had this year so far. And I really want to make some progress on those things that are the closest to finish. So next is Morning Blooms by Carolyn Manning. I am stitching this one on 18 count Aida that I dyed myself, just a scrap fabric piece. 2/1 full cross with the code for DMC. Here's where I was the last time I showed this. I started it in May for Manning May of 2024. And in February, I did an additional 1,472 stitches. In total, I'm at 4,549 for 40.45%. So here's where I'm at now. And it's perfectly symmetrical, so you could flip it either way to say whatever the orientation is, but I think this is the way I have it marked on Pattern Keeper, so I'm just holding it this way to show this progress. Okay, excited to get that one done. Hoping I can get it done by May and maybe focus on this a little bit in Manning May of this year. Okay, next is New York. This is a Luca S kit. I swapped out the fabric that is included in the kit for a 25 count Easy Guide Lugana to try to make it a little easier to follow the squares, and also doing a 10 stitch to try to make it a little faster. I stitched in February. Oh, here's where I was the last time I showed it. And in February, I stitched an additional 564 stitches. In total, I'm at 3,576 stitches for 3.47%. So quite a lot to go. But here's where I'm at now. Loving these like light pastel colors. Feel very spring to me. I'm enjoying working on this one. It's just very spread out. So I have to be in the mood to kind of be a little more spread out. I'm not a Parker. I've been more extreme cross country or just cross country and then just switching up the color. I think parking confuses me a little bit, so it's hard to find a rhythm with this one just because it is so spread out with the colors. But I do love the color scheme when I'm in the mood for working on pastels. This is a good one to pick up. Okay, next is another kit. This is Paris Market by Dimensions Gold. I also swapped this one out for the fabric that comes in the kit for a 25 count Easy Grid Lugana. Again, just so I could have the grids for a little easier to follow against the pattern. And then also so I could do 10 stitch to try to make it a little quicker. I am using all the floss that's included in the kit. Here's where I was last month. I had restarted this last month on this 25 count fabric from what came in the kit just to make it a little easier. So this is only my second month. In February, I did an additional 1,108 stitches, and now I'm in total at 4,716 stitches for 8.82%. So this one's a little smaller than New York, so it's going a little quicker. Here's where I am now. Zoom in a little bit. Got some of that gray going. Got some fill-in going, and a lot more of the green. Okay, next is the two pieces that I worked on for Stitch Jane 2025. The first one is Pride and Prejudice. This is by Lena Ova. I am doing a cropped version of this pattern. I'm not doing the outside border just to save on some of the stitching. And I am stitching this one on 20 count, the Ernest Emma that's from my shop. And I am stitching it with Silks for You PR 065 2/1 full cross. Here's where I was the last time I showed this. In February, I stitched an additional 4,133 stitches, and now in total I'm at 13,749 stitches for 63.73% of the portion that I'm stitching, so without the outer border. And here's where I'm at now. Love that that whole top is done and the whole section at the bottom with Lizzie and Mr. Darcy, and now I just have that left section to go. I did find that I made a bit of a mistake in the border on this new section, but I just fibbed it and it's good enough. I was not unpicking the whole thing to fix one missing stitch. So I just made it work. Hopefully it doesn't bother me. I think it's okay. So excited. This one's another one that's a few thousand more to go before I'm done, but hoping to get it done this year. Okay, next one is also Jane Austen inspired. This is the Pride and Prejudice sampler by Twin Peaks Primitive. I am stitching this one on 25 count Honeydew by Forbidden Fiber Co. 1/1 full cross with the called for DMC. Here's where I was the last time I showed this. This one's been a couple months since I picked this one up as well. I had seen this on the brag table at StitchCon back in June, and it was on this green fabric, and I really loved it. And I came home and immediately wanted to start it. I think this was my birthday start or one of my July starts for last year, or around my birthday. And I haven't worked on it much since then, so I'm excited to pick this one back up. I did an additional 1,099 stitches in February, and now in total I'm at 1,666. And here's where I'm at now. Doesn't look like much, but it's getting there. Showing like the DMC looks a lot darker on the screen than it actually is in real life. And actually, the green looks a little more muted. It really is a honeydew, like mint green color with a lot lighter, probably more like, I don't know, a little darker than that, but probably more like that. So loving how it's coming out on that green fabric. It's just beautiful. A little hard to see 1/1 on 25 count sometimes. So I go back and forth between, can I work on 25 count at this point? Can I see? Or do I need to work on something with a different stitch count that I can see a little better? So speaking of which, the next one is one I pulled out because it is on 20 count, so it's a little easier for me to see. This is Stephen King House. It's by the Witchy Stitcher. I'm stitching this on 20 count Startling Steerforth, which is a color from my shop as well. I did, oh, here's where I was the last time I showed this. I did an additional 1,404 stitches in February. Now in total, I'm at 2,057 for 13.28%. And here's where I'm at now. Love it, very spooky. Very easy to just stitch all that black and work on that outer pattern. And I love houses and buildings and stitching buildings. So I'm loving how this is coming out and enjoying working on it. I can't wait to get some of those motifs in the rooms going as well. Okay, next is The Perfect Love I Never Had. This is, the artist is Adrienne Border and it's charted by Unconventional Cross Stitch. I'm stitching this one on 25 count Easy Guide Lugana, 3/110 stitch with the called for DMC. In February, I did an additional 942 stitches. In total on this one, I'm at 13,768 stitches for 28.33%. Here's where I was the last time I showed this on a video. And in February, Kaylee 10 Stitch, I'll link her down below as well. She typically hosts a hashtag for February. I think it's UXS28 or UXS29 for a leap year. And the idea is to work on something unconventional cross stitch every day in February. Well, I started the first few days and then I petered out. So I just worked on this for a few days and it's only those few days of progress that I got into this one. But here's where I'm at now. Filling in a little more of her face. Just love that eye and love how she's coming out. I love Adrienne Border's artwork. Making some progress on that one. Okay, and last but not least, I am going to stand up for this one this month. This is the Grand Library. This is the regular size max color version. The artist is Amy Stewart, and it's charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. Um, I'm not even going to show you where my progress was of last month because I didn't stand up. I only showed like the row that I was working on. I'm going to stand up this time and show you the whole thing. I am finally down to that bottom row. I'm working on the top 5 colors and the bottom 10 colors, and I'm on the last row of pages. I'm almost done with these. Once I get through, I think there's like 10 more pages, but once I get done with this last row of pages, I'm done with those 15 colors. So I'm super excited to see this progress, and I have like a renewed vigor for working on this one because I'm enjoying working on it again. So in February, I did an additional 4,647 stitches. And in total, I'm at 223,809 stitches for 55.57%. I am stitching this one on 18 count easy guide Lugana. In high, no, sorry, Ada. And in hindsight, I wish I would have done something smaller because it is giant. That's why I'm going to stand up to show it to you. So I'm going to pause for just a second so I can back up and show you. Okay, here is where I'm at. This is the Grand Library. I have made it all the way across with these 15 colors, and now I'm working all the way at the bottom. On this mystery section, I have finished those 2 pages, which is those 10 colors, and I'm working over now to the next section. So this is just coming out amazing, but it is huge. So this is the Grand Library, everybody. So that's the end of my cross stitch section of the video. Next, I'm going to talk about books. Next month for my video, I will be at my 2-year anniversary of being on Flosstube, so my Flosstube anniversary. I will have some giveaways on that video, so I hope you subscribe and join me next time if you're signing off at this point. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. If you're sticking around, let's talk about books. So in February, I read 8 books. The first one was Matchmaking for Beginners by Maddie Dawson. I'm pretty sure I've read this one before. There were several of the characters and parts of the storyline that sounded really familiar, and I knew it was going to happen, so I'm sure I've read it, but I couldn't remember like how it ended or the rest of the storyline or what ended up happening, so I decided to reread it. And the premise is that there's a young lady named Marnie who, at the very beginning of the book, goes to a family party for her fiance's family, and she meets his great aunt Blix, who is kind of the oddball of the family. She's a little eccentric and a little out there, but they hit it off right away and become immediately connected. And I think they only talk like one more time before Blix passes away. And Blix ends up leaving Marnie her house. And it's in a different state. It's Marnie's completely surprised by this, but she goes to the house to try to kind of prep it for potentially selling it. And it is a split up house with multiple apartments with different boarders that live in the different apartments. So there's several different characters that she gets to meet and, have relationships with and become friends with. And she's kind of got this talent for matchmaking, which is like what Blix had as well, and gets this feeling about some of these people that are in this house and tries to start setting them up with other people that she knows they're supposed to be with, and just kind of makes progress in her own life as well as she's learning about herself and whether she wants to keep this house or not, and becomes friends and has relationships with people within the house. It was a cute book. It was a fairly fast read, so obviously I've read it twice now, so it was worth reading. I think it was a pretty good one from one of my February reads. Next, I read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is a young adult fantasy novel, and it takes place in a world where people with special powers have kind of dominate the world, and they have this idea of the people that are powerless or don't have special powers or kind of diseased and hurting them, so they're on these quests, and there's these laws and everything made by the king that the powerless actually need to be hunted and jailed or even exterminated. So Peyton is the main character, and she's a young lady that actually is powerless, but she was brought up by a dad who taught her to fight and taught her to get by with faking like she has psychic powers. And she's just very smart and very observant and kind of uses those talents rather to get away with um, being powerless and not being one of the ones that's hunted or arrested. But the idea in this kingdom is that they go through these kind of games or festivals where sort of Hunger Games like, just not quite as violent, of the like older teens or young adults are called into this arena to kind of show who is the most powerful and who deserves to have like the greatest of all time kind of power of the year, at least, or of the time until the next festival. So Peyton is one of the people that's actually put on the list to be put into this festival, and she has no power. So part of the festival and part of these games is living in the castle while these games are going on with this king who has laws that are against her people, and who the king has actually killed her father or ordered her father to be killed, and she's befriending the princes who she can't completely be honest with because she can't ever let go of the fact that she has this hate for these people and these laws, and they're all against her and who she really is, and the fact that she doesn't have any power. So there's this not only going through like the adventures of going through the games and trying to survive the games with all these other powerful competitors, but then having to hide when she's back outside of the games of who she really is so she doesn't get killed for not having power. So interesting kind of love triangle thing with the princes, but not really being able to be herself, and the whole hidden kind of agenda thing going on. Interesting way to end the book, because I think it is a series. It was definitely set up to be a series if it isn't, because it was ended on a not so happy note. So, and definitely left open for a lot of continuation for the story. So it's good for a young adult novel. There's definitely some, not the greatest, like there's some editing issues and there's some things that were a little confusing, I think, because the editing didn't do great, but I found it was good for a young adult novel. I'd be interested in continuing the story and going on to the next one. Next, I read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This one I would call kinky spice. It was part of the premise um, that starts this one out is partly the interest in the kink of the two characters. So Deep End, as a title, relates to the two main characters actually being part of the aquatics team at Stanford. Scarlett is a diver, and Lucas is an Olympic winning swimmer, but they're part of the same. I guess aquatics is all considered part of the same team. So they're kind of pushed together by another teammate who knows that they're both interested in kink and just kind of encourages them to have this physical relationship because they might enjoy each other. And it does start out very physical, and then you start to get to know the background of the different of both of their characters, with the sports pressures and the physical toll it takes on you and the dedication and the psychological toll it can take on you as a competitor, and complicated family histories and some deep psychological hurdles that have to like with that occur in real life, but also especially in sports where there's mental block, or even in creative capacities as well, where there's this mental block, and they can really impair you if you can't get back past whatever that psychological um, trigger is that caused you to have that mental block. So really good kind of emotional and psychological analysis and in-depth pieces to each of the characters that I'd enjoyed about this one. The kink was a little too kinky for me, but you can look, it wasn't the major part of the story. It was just part of their characters and how they ended up initially getting together. So interesting for the other parts of it and how smart and deeply personal the characters became. So I do like Ali Hazelwood still. Will continue to read her books as well, and really really liked the anxiety parts of this, and how real some of that psychosis can go, and how much therapy can help some of that. So appreciated that part. Next, I read Outlander by Diana Galbadon. I don't know if I'm saying that right, Galbadon. I have watched the series. It's been out on Stars for several years now. This is the first in a series of many, many books in this series, the Outlander series that she's written as well. I think I went back and watched the first season of the series again after I finished this book, and they did a really good job in the first season of the series, keeping really close to the book. After season one, it starts to veer off a little bit, and the characters take some different arches, which I get is probably better for TV. But the first book does cover like several seasons of the actual TV show. If you've never heard of it before or seen it on TV, the premise is that Claire, it initially takes place post World War II, And Claire and her husband are going on the second honeymoon now that the war is over and they're finally getting to spend some time together. They go to Scotland and have the second honeymoon in Scotland where they discover this kind of rock formation that speaks to Claire a little bit about something powerful going on there. And she does go back to this rock formation at some point and she falls through this kind of time loop or this time wormhole and ends up 250 years in the past in Scotland. So she had been a nurse during World War II. So when she falls back through this wormhole to this past, 1700s time, 18th century Scotland, before all this technology, before women were anything but witches, if they knew anything about, health or the body or interfering with anything, she's trying to fit in and, figure out what's going on in how to get back home. She wants to get back to her husband, but she's trapped in this time where all these men take her captive and want her to, heal them and think she's a witch and question whether she's a spy and just a bunch of things going on back in the history of that time. Well written, really great characters, a lot of adventure, a lot of um, action. And then there's, of course, the love story and the being torn between somebody that you meet in the past that you look to for friendship and guidance and protection and wanting to get home to your husband that you knew at home. So a bit of a love triangle, definitely a love triangle there as well. And what decisions do you make about going back or, staying with the love that you find in the past? Next is Someone I Used to Know by Paige Toon. So this is the story mostly of Leah growing up in a household where she's the only birth child of her parents, but her parents are foster parents and they take in several different ages of kids that are in the foster system throughout the years as she's growing up. It alternates between a current timeline of her as an adult with her daughter and her family now, and then the past timeline of around the time that I think she's 15 or 16 and one particular foster child comes into the house. His name is George, and she has a really great connection with him and really becomes really good friends with him. When he comes into the house and he's new to the school, there's also another local boy who is considered the rich kid of the town that had been in boarding school all his life and got kicked out of boarding school and is now going to the same high school that they're going to. So the three of them kind of hit it up and become really great friends. They kind of form a bond with each other and become inseparable friends in some ways for like their kind of loneliness and what they've been through. Leah in particular for like the personal attention she's getting that she doesn't really feel like she gets at home, and the boys really for just needing anyone in their lives for the stuff that they've been through. So she in particular forms a bond with each of them in different ways, and each of the boys in her past and in her present just have a different way of affecting her in a different relationship in her life. What I really enjoyed about this book is that it is very accurate in the really sad reality of the foster system and the trauma that these kids can go through, not only like what led them to being in the foster system, but while they're in the system with horrible placements that are out there and just being a lot of times separated from siblings or separated from other family. uh, my husband and I were foster parents for a short time, and several of the kids' stories that were in this book were very similar to stories that we heard of real life kids and what we saw through that experience. So it was just heartbreaking to read something like that and to go a little deeper into some of the psychosis of what this might create in some of these fictional characters. But I could see being very true in real life as well. So great job with not only the toll it takes on the foster kids, but also on Leah just being the kid of these parents that kind of neglect her so that they can focus on the foster kids and what that creates in her. She's not really resentful, but she's very aware of it and just wish how do she's happy that her parents helped these kids and she's happy that she had all these kids in her life and she was able to make whatever sort of impact she could. But then also kind of sad that she didn't have a closer relationship with her parents or didn't get that kind of attention that she would have as with less kids in the house, I guess. So I do appreciate the reality of some of that, different emotions that a lot of that stuff can create. Next, I read The Bright Side of Disaster by Catherine Center. Catherine Center, I think I've read before, and she's considered a romance novelist, but this was not a typical romance. This was actually the premise was Jenny is a very, very pregnant young lady, and she's definitely off schedule for where she pictured her life would be. She's not married, but she is engaged, and just things are kind of happening out of order, but she's totally okay with it. She's happy. She's getting ready and nesting for the baby and feeling good about everything. And then her fiance starts to become a little distant and be gone a little more. He's acting really odd, and she keeps asking what's wrong, and he keeps saying nothing. Finally, he admits something's wrong and he just leaves one night and doesn't come back. And the next day, she goes into labor and has this baby. So, totally off track from anything that she had planned. And, very, going through this grief of losing her, not only losing her fiance when she thought she was going to be having this family, but also uh, like the idea of what she thought her life was going to be. And really going through um, the motherhood kind of wasn't what she thought it was going to be. It's a lot harder than she thought it was going to be, and it's not as even the birthing process and her birthing plan was nothing like she planned, and nothing like as magical and wonderful as she thought it was going to be. So really, really raw and well done writing for the struggles of moms during birth and motherhood, and especially as a first time mom. There were several other characters that were moms, first time moms and not first time moms. And they all had different stories of how they were navigating through motherhood and through their new babies. And sometimes it was different than their other experiences. And they're all different from each other, and they're all handling it differently. So I thought it was really well written from the perspective of a mom and being a new mom. There is an element of romance in there with a neighbor that she befriends that um, is helping her out and just kind of takes an interest in her story and being her friend. But it is not the main premise of the book. The main premise is really her just navigating through no sleep, no time, no showers, being a new mom, and trying to go through whatever this grief is of the losses that she's experienced with her life and her fiance. Next, I read James by Percival Everett. This is the story from Jim's perspective, from the adventures of, or a different perspective from the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, if you were looking at it through Jim's perspective, who is the slave that is part of that story. Um, so Huck, from the same as the original story, Huck and Jim. Jim actually escapes from slavery, and Huck actually fakes his own death so he can run away from home. And they end up running into each other and traveling down the river together. This is a different take on Huck Finn, and interesting that it's portrayed from Jim's perspective. I thought it was interesting to see how they characterized him as much more educated and complicated than he was portrayed in Huck Finn, but he deliberately had to hide some of this just to stay alive, just because that was kind of the rules of the time, and you can't say certain things or act certain ways or even appear as if you have intelligence or you could be in trouble. It was really well written, really well done. I think it was a great retelling from a different perspective, like a lot of stuff we're seeing just from misunderstood characters or from the perspective of the villain. Jim wasn't a villain, but just a different part of his character that you may not have seen in the original story. Well done and well written on that one as well. Next, I read One of Our Own by Lucinda Berry. The idea of this book is Felicia is a volunteer crisis counselor for a suicide hotline. She gets a call one night from a young lady who's in high school who actually blurts out the name of the high school the lady that's taking Felicia knows people from. Her son actually goes to that school as well. So she's somehow interconnected with it, but she's not really sure who this young lady is. She breaks the cardinal rule of crisis counseling, and she gives out her personal number to this young lady, just really trying to save her and keep her from hurting herself. So the girl does end up reaching out, and as Felicia learns more about what led this girl to be in this desperate situation. She's Felicia starts questioning her own life and her son and whether he knows about what's going on or might know this girl somehow. So she's just questioning everything and really trying to help this girl at the same time. I will say there's some very disturbing circumstances of what leads this young lady to call in the first place. So she's telling her story. There are lots of possible triggers and not just with the story, but just the fact that she is in this really horrible situation where she feels like she has to take her own life. Um, it is a fairly short book. It is, kind of a lot of build up to the story where I felt like at the very end it was very rushed through the end, but I don't think it ruined it for me. I think it wouldn't have held any weight to continue any further into the story. I thought it was wrapped up nicely. Um, but it was pretty quick. It was a very quick read. So I don't think it was a novella. It was a little longer than that, but it certainly wasn't a full novel. So if you're interested in kind of a mystery, this would be a good one, just keeping in mind those warnings of the triggers that it is a very traumatic story. Whew. Probably should have ended on a different book. That was a tough one. So that's the end of my February reading. Thank you again for joining me if you've made it this far. I hope everyone has a fantastic month of stitching and reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.